morning. As she mentioned, I'm Vanessa Burkhardt. I'm one of the enterprise data architects at Social Security Administration, where we've been collecting data to serve the American public for 87 years. And now I've been looking at the agency's data for over a decade, and I'm still continuously surprised by the breadth, the variety of cradle to grave data that we have to collect and maintain in order to support all of the services we provide. Now, the long history of our data, combined with the ever-increasing list of services we offer, provides quite a challenge for data administration. Today's topic was actually inspired by a marketing campaign that we had a few years back. It's still up on the site. And I'm going to apologize if the start here feels a little like an advertisement, but it did a fantastic job of laying out exactly the impact that Social Security has on the American public. Our current slogan is securing your today and tomorrow. And when most people think about Social Security, they're thinking about the future when they retire, right? That's the tomorrow part. That's kind of easy. And 3 out of every 4 individuals receiving benefits at SSA are in fact retirees, 48.5 million right now. The today part is the other 22 million folks receiving benefits, as well as everything that we're doing today, right now, not related to current beneficiaries, recipients, or applicants, which is preparing the way for them to receive benefits tomorrow in their futures. Everyone's journey at SSA starts when they get their Social Security number. You or your parents might have come into a Social Security office. If it was after 2002, you may have worked with DHS to get your information over to us as part of your immigration process. If you were born after 1987, your parents probably just checked a box on your birth registration, and then State and Vital Statistics Office sent us the information. Today, 90% of the SSNs we issue come through enumeration at birth. And starting in 1987, the IRS started requiring all dependents over the age of 5 to have an SSN. It's everybody now, which means almost everyone in the American public has a Social Security number. A funny thing about that 1987 tax year, 7 million kids suddenly vanished, but only from tax filings. So our job only starts when we give you that SSN. We're there supporting all of the big moments in your life. When you get that first job, or any job, because all of the W-2s come to Social Security, and we then reconcile those earnings with everything that goes to the IRS. When you change your name because you're getting married, or for any reason, because you gotta come to Social Security to do that. My personal favorite is when you're planning your families. It's a really big production when we publish the baby name rankings every year. I personally stay away from Emma. She's been top 3 for 20 years now. Are there any Michaels in the room? I knew there'd be one. Michaels were top 3 for 58 years. Now, of course, everybody knows we're part of that exciting retirement chapter, right? That's what we're known for. Pro tip, please go to My Social Security at least once a year to check your Social Security statement. The more time has passed, the less likely you are to have the evidence you need to fix any issues that we might have with your earnings record. And it also includes a benefit estimator, which is really, really good for planning. Now, we're also there for all of the difficult times. We offer disability benefits for individuals who can't work for long periods of time due to medical conditions, whether it's adults or children. We work with the DoD and the VA to expedite SSA disability benefits for veterans and active military who most need our support. For surviving spouses, children, and sometimes even parents and grandchildren who've lost a loved one too soon, we have a variety of survivor benefits. And for the elderly, disabled, and blind who are finding themselves in financial straits, we offer the Supplemental Security Income Program. Now, SSA was established in order to meet the needs of the most vulnerable populations of the American public. I mean, we're seeing that here, right? It's an honor and a responsibility that my colleagues and I take extremely seriously, which is why I kind of want to go a little bit to show you the challenges and the value that Kafka is going to bring to us by taking just a tiny stroll through SSA's history. Over its 87-year history, the SSA program has expanded significantly. In its first 60 years, there were 11 different expansions to the program. In addition to that, there were dozens and dozens of laws passed, sometimes more than one in those years, which changed the program. Some of those were complete overhauls of the existing programs in order to address the financial viability of SSA. Now, technologically, we were in the early years, technology advanced rapidly, and SSA was known as a leader of innovation for its first 3 decades. The agency leaders were looking to the future and planning ahead. Computers were in their embryonic stage at the time, so as SSA's needs to further automate our processes, especially when it comes to that earnings report stuff, we were actually pushing IBM towards more and more innovation. But then the landscape changed. Starting in 1968, there were a series of mandatory layoffs across the federal government, really. But SSA's responsibilities were simultaneously expanding. Like was common at the time, SSA's technical staff had been self-taught, and they've become a little bit too comfortable and allowed their skill set to stagnate. And then there's that 1972 to 1981 period where there were 15 new laws passed, 4 of them which were new benefits or significant changes to the existing programs. And that same time period saw 7 agency heads and 4 different reorgs. That's all to say, it all changed very rapidly, and we were very rarely actually given the appropriate time to implement any of the changes that were being demanded of us. As new systems were being built to meet needs of legislation, court orders, executive orders, or just leadership initiatives, long-term and strategic planning by necessity just took a back seat. And those systems that weren't affected by any of the new changes, unfortunately, by necessity, they started to collect technical debt. The reality of most federal agencies is we just don't have the resources to both do technological updates to existing systems and keep up with everything new that's coming along. So don't fix what ain't broke had taken hold. Now, SSA having been one of the earliest adopters of computing technologies, we were particularly hit hard by that technical debt crisis. And by 1982, we had the oldest computer systems in the entire federal government. So we looked at a complete overhaul at that point in time. It was the Systems Modernization Plan, and it was at least in part because the SSI rollout had been a complete disaster. Now, there's a really, really good report on our historical archives online from 1986 that lays out all of the different challenges that occurred during that SMP rollout period. And by 1990, SSA was once again state of the art for 1982 when the modernization started. And now we're finding ourselves once again in a modernization cycle, and I'm actually really excited because we're starting to see sparks of that push boundary innovative spirit rekindling at the agency, and Kafka's leading the way. So all of our services feed into each other. The various different things we do ultimately just kind of play together. So it's really easy to see how it would make sense to convert everything we do in batch over to event-driven architectures. And I'm going to mostly talk about the art of the possible and the potential and everything we're able to do at the agency, but I really want to start with the beating heart of Social Security, which is earnings. Now, earnings is usually thought of as an IRS thing, but W-2s and W-3s actually come to Social Security. And then in return, the IRS sends us earnings that come on tax filings like self-employment. Now, because employers have to send the taxes that they pay to the IRS on a quarterly basis, every fall we start a reconciliation process to make sure that the earnings that were reported to SSA match up with the taxes that were filed with the IRS. If there's earnings missing, then SSA opens a case and looks into it and works with the employers to get those missing earnings. And if the employers are unresponsive, then the case transfers to the IRS. If the taxes are missing, well, IRS always gets their due. Now, earnings is at the very core of our benefit system. It's part of how you determine if you're entitled for Title II or how the benefits are computed. And those are the big ones. That's retirement, survivor, disability. That's what we're known for. Additionally, earnings determine your Medicare entitlement. And you may have noticed Medicare keeps coming up even though we're Social Security, not CMS. When Medicare was established, SSA wasn't an independent agency at the time, and we were doing the Medicare. We still actually do all the in-person customer support for the Medicare programs. And your earnings are also used as a form of employment history as part of the disability evaluation process. And in order to adjudicate the SSI benefits, which are a monthly benefit, individuals have to self-report their earnings every month. And so once a year, we compare those monthly self-reporting to the earnings that come in from the employers to make sure everything's lining up. Additionally, the entirety of earnings, not just one person's, is used for actuary calculations. Things like determining the status of the trust funds or where it's going to be going, and the national wage index, which ultimately affect our benefit systems. Now, it only makes sense that, like with the advent of punch cards and magnetic tape, microfilm and disk storage, that it's earnings that's leading the way with the adoption of Kafka. And understanding how earnings processing goes is as simple and uncomplicated as our tax laws. However, what we do with those earnings once we have them for the benefit systems is really quite simple. You're confirming that the earning record is correct. You're calculating the earnings credits that the individual has based on the annual Social Security taxable income. And then you're taking the indexed income over time to determine the top 35 years for the benefit calculation. It's not that much. So as we were looking at how do we modernize earnings, particularly, one of our biggest challenges is actually the data structure for how we store those earnings. It's an all-purpose data structure, and all-purpose is no purpose, right? And it only made sense then that we'd start looking at things like the CQRS architecture patterns, which then took us to event stores, which then took us to event-driven architectures, and eventually to Kafka. And I should note this journey started back in 2018, so it's been a hot minute. To complicate all of that, we have a whole bunch of different reporting lines for how those different earnings come in. We talked about W-2 and self-employment a little earlier. Each of those reporting lines, of course, has completely different rules, but right now they're all tangled together. So part of our plan is to untangle each of those reporting lines and bring them into independent lines as we go along and tackle them one at a time. And as each reporting line comes online into the Kafka space, the system of record will shift from the existing data store into the Kafka realm and the event stores. Now, our very, very unconventional pilot for Kafka was this earnings use case. It's not your typical, simple, quick pilot. And I promise I am not going to go into the tax law jungle. But the basics of what we're doing is we get a file from the IRS that has those earnings reports. We break up those reports and we validate them individually and then send them to evidence storage, as well as compare the SSN and name that comes in that earnings report against agency data in order to verify the earner's information and credit their earnings. Or if we couldn't verify them, then we suspend those earnings for future research. And that's basically it. It's pretty simple. And in order to transitionally support our benefit systems that still rely on the existing data store, we're then going to take those credited earnings and push them into the master earnings file, or the MEF, and those suspended earnings then go into the suspense file, or suspense. They're not actually files, they haven't been for a really long time, but the old names kind of just stick around. Our hope is that because all of the reporting lines kind of follow the same general pattern, once everything's in the Kafka space, that opens up the new possibility of let's start building new query models that actually support just the benefit side, or just support whatever the use case is. And once everybody's moved off of the existing data stores and onto their new custom model or models, then we can actually turn off the existing data stores. But we can transitionally maintain these various query models in parallel for as long as we need to. I'm really looking forward to getting rid of the all-purpose data stores. So what's the potential for earnings, right, once you've got it in there? Once earnings are available in real time, what's stopping us from moving everything we do in batch real time, or eliminating some of our existing manual processes? Things like the technician not having to check every day if the earnings correction that they requested for claims that they're processing has gone through. Those can take a while. Really check your statements. And I do want to mention, this one's pretty easy, but some of the other use cases I'm going to put up here will require legislative or policy changes, so we won't be able to tackle them anytime soon, but I do want to focus on the art of the possible. And that kind of brings us to that real-time IRS reconciliation. If we can create an employer dashboard where they can see if their data is in sync between the two agencies in real time, that would be super helpful, because one of the things we've realized is the sooner employers know that there's a problem with the earnings that they've given us, the more likely they are to actually fix the problem. And if they fix the problem, it's better for you. And what about folks that continue to work after they've started collecting retirement benefits? Well, we have to recalculate their earnings, their benefit calculation, based on those new earnings that came in, because new earnings could mean an increase in their benefits. Right now, this is a periodic scan of the entire earnings store to see if any of the beneficiaries have new earnings. But if we can recalculate it as soon as the new earnings come in, that would massively reduce our processing. It's things like identifying the best benefit for a given individual. We're required to check every possible benefit that you're eligible for. You may be getting a better benefit off of your spouse's record than off of your own record, and we'll do that. But if you both keep working, that calculation could change over time. Or it could also be someone that became disabled but continues to do some minimal work underneath the limits for income, that didn't qualify for a Title II disability because they didn't have enough earnings credits, but because they continued to work minimally under the Supplemental Security Income Program, they suddenly were able to get the earnings credits they were missing and now qualify for Title II benefits, which if they had significant earnings prior to becoming disabled, could be a huge bump in benefits for that individual. And coming back to that SSI reporting piece right now, again, it's a full scan of all of the beneficiaries. But if we can do an automatic check when earnings come in against those SSI recipients and what they've self-reported, we can identify those discrepancies that exist faster, which means reducing overpayments, underpayments, all of those kinds of things. And then we always talk about cybersecurity and more threats and all that stuff lately. So having all of our earnings report processing in Kafka means that we can apply Sigma rules to those topics and identify the ever complicated and more challenging fraud situations or suspicious reporting situations that come in as they're happening, allowing us to collect more data on incidents when they occur. So while earnings is our bleeding heart, ultimately, our mission is the people we serve. And everything that we collect about the American public affects all of our systems, right? That's the center of everything. And things like name and gender, that changes how we interact with the people we're working with. Things like birth, citizenship, death, those things affect your entitlement, eligibility, different protections that could come into play. If you or someone you know is in danger of domestic violence, we can actually issue you a new Social Security number with proof of life endangerment. And if you find yourself in an identity theft situation, we can apply additional protections to your record. One of the most widely used use cases at SSA is SSN name verification. You see it when we do e-verify for employers, that's collaboration with DHS. Employers determine whether or not you're eligible for employment based on your immigration status. There's the earnings report processing use case I spoke about earlier. We also provide a service for employers to be able to do that SSN name verification prior to sending us the reports to make sure everything's good before they send it. And for banks and other institutions that need to be able to verify SSNs but require consent of the number holder first, we also have the consent-based SSN name verification service. So there's quite a few use cases of it, and traditional APIs can support the volumes now, but those volumes keep going up. And this may not surprise anyone in government, but our critical enumeration data set is effectively a collection of SS5s. SS5s are the form you fill out to request a new Social Security number or a new replacement card or change any of your data. So all of those APIs have to step through all of those records in order to generate what the person is to do their processing. What Kafka allows us to do is apply a CDC connector on top of our NumIdent store and generate a compacted person topic. Then when an alleged person comes in, we can run that comparison and issue the verified or not verified events. This allows us to get to the high volumes that we're talking about and that we're seeing coming our way going forward. And while the API solutions we have in place support the earnings report processing for the pilot, for that unreported tips and wages use case, it won't for W-2s when all of those are coming in the last 2 weeks of January, since employers have to submit them by January 31st and everybody waits till last minute. So this would allow us to actually support everything in real time, in high volumes, and prepare for the future. And we're also seeing, once again, earnings is driving that Kafka innovation, even outside of the earnings realm. So unfortunately, the person information that actually has the biggest impact when it changes is when someone dies. And the month that an individual dies, all of their entitlements are terminated, all of their benefits are terminated. So while we verify the deaths before we do that termination, being able to have all that information in Kafka would help coordinate that effort a little bit faster. And we're legislatively mandated to publish the death information that we have on 2 different death master files in coordination with NTIS. One of the versions is available for federal partners that are also benefit payers that has the full data set. And then there's a second version that's available for businesses that need to use it for fraud prevention metrics, which excludes anything that comes from the states. The death information comes from a whole variety of sources, and it's certainly not comprehensive. We don't have any foreign deaths, for example, for the most part. And the data that we have is only as good as the source. So we do warn all of our consumers to trust but verify. So make sure that that death actually occurred before you do anything. But unfortunately, most of consumers don't. Which leads us to one of our big problems. We're in the news pretty regularly for the fact that we killed somebody that was still alive, and the impact that that has on their lives. Because bank accounts get closed, policies get shut down, all medical appointments get canceled. There's a whole bunch of things that happen because it got published to a death master file. And while coming in and showing proof of life to SSA is a quick fix for us, we update our records, we send the update on, hey, here's the death, this person's not dead. Most consumers aren't actually responding to those removal events. The hope is that by putting those removals in a targeted space and highlighting those, we might actually be able to get them to react to it and do something to help minimize the impact to that community. Right now, the Death Master File updates, you can subscribe either weekly or monthly updates. So moving all this stuff to real time would help in a whole bunch of different ways. Now, why would we do batch when we can do real time, right? There's a whole bunch of automated things that we do at SSA once we've confirmed that death. And one of those is actually the one-time lump sum payment that goes out. If an individual who is deceased already had dependents on the record that qualify for that payment, it automatically goes out. But we could do that in real time if we were streaming death data. Those dependents can be converted over to survivor benefits on notification of the deceased, which could impact their benefit payment. And if the deceased had any debts with the agencies from overpayments or whatever the case may be, we can transfer collection over to their estate, or in the absence of an estate, just close out the debt. That reduces the workloads for technicians that are having to do that debt collection process. Now, a lot of the pattern that you saw today was, hey, let's get batch into real time, right? Let's eliminate the batch. Let's move it to real time there. And we're just starting our Kafka journey. We just got our first use case into production about a month ago. So we're very excited about that one. It's that earnings use case, and so far everything's looking great. We're very excited. So the possibilities for us are endless, right? I actually had to cut like another 6 slides of all the different things that we could do with Kafka at the agency from here. But it's now our job to secure your today, but hopefully a brighter tomorrow as well. Thank you.